After 2 years of sitting on the shelf, the Toxic Avenger is finally released in theaters. Based on the cult classic movies by Troma of the same name, we follow Peter Dinklage, who plays Winston, a janitor who works in a chemical factory that one day finds himself engulfed in toxic chemicals, transforming him into the Toxic Avenger. From here, Winston must now do everything in his power to stop the evil people behind the company. And that's all. Putting a second any spoilers to you guys. This will be a spoiler-free review. Real quick, I want to give a shout out to Trick or Treat Studios. They didn't sponsor me or anything, but they were kind enough to reach out and send me a free Toxic Avenger mask. That, along with these lovely fingers, I'm going to be able to attach to my Chucky doll up there. Thank you. Huge fan of Trick or Treat Studios, and if you decide to get anything from them, please let them know I sent them your way. But okay, getting back to the Toxic Avenger here. So, believe it or not, I am kind of a fan of this franchise. I've mentioned before, I was given a laptop a little too young in my life, 11 years old, and once I found out how to illegally download movies, that's all I was doing all summer. Just typing on Google in the early days, top 10 horror movies, top 10 comedies, and running through that list. And by the age of like 13, I think I had gone and seen all the mainstream films, so started scraping the bottom of the barrel, and thus came out the Toxic Avenger franchise. They were made by a company named Troma Entertainment that is actually the longest running independent film studio to date. They specialize in making low budget raunchy movies, horror and comedy, but very much geared towards adults. And there's even famous people today that got their start with Troma, like none other than James Gunn.
Really happy since I moved to Hollywood because I did the niftiest, neatest, coolest thing. I totally sold my soul to Satan. I had to kill a young child to do it, but it's awesome because ever since I've done it, I've been totally rich. I made Scooby-Doo.
I think that's about all the clips I can play if I ever want to be invited back to a DC event. But I do remember sitting down and watching at least that first Toxic Avenger movie. There's 4 of them in total, and look, I cannot sit here and recommend these movies to you. They are of a different time, of a different breed. I think the first movie is free to watch on YouTube right now. Funny enough, Troma Entertainment at one point did have a YouTube channel where they were just posting the movies they've made for free, but they were so inappropriate, so raunchy, YouTube terminated their channel. And that gives you kind of an idea of what Troma was. It was just like raunchy, in your face, offensive, trying to make you laugh kind of content. And so you think into the world we live in today where everyone is super sensitive, you do wonder, how can you make a Toxic Avenger movie work today? And I was curious, and this movie actually got shown to people 2 years ago, all the way back in 2023, and it has sat on a shelf ever since then because no studio wanted to release it because they just thought it just doesn't work with modern audiences. And after seeing the film, I can kind of understand why. Look, I think it is going to be very hard to review this because since I grew up, or I guess I watched Troma and Toxic Avenger movies as a kid, I totally got the style and vibe they were going for in this movie, and they actually do replicate it quite well. Funny enough, although the Toxic Avenger clearly sounds like some sort of superhero today, and I can't imagine the grandmas or uncles that are going to buy a ticket with just seeing the word Avenger going, "This is that new Marvel flick. We gotta watch that Marvel flick. Tony, you coming? We're watching the new Marvel." And I think that is actually what's happening because there's tons of articles about people walking out during this movie. But I did feel them trying to recapture that Troma vibe, and there was a part of me that was almost nostalgic to it and was thinking, I feel what they're going for here. But like I was mentioning, although it's not based off a comic book character, and even though this has had a cartoon show back in the day, don't know why when if you've seen at all that first movie, don't know who sat there and thought, you know who'd love this? Children. But this reboot is more of an alternate timeline or a different version of the Toxic Avenger. In the original 1984 film, we had Melvin, a dorky kid where they pulled a prank on him thinking he was going to kiss the hot chick, but he ended up kissing a sheep, and then he's chased out a window, thrown in some toxic chemicals, and he becomes the Toxic Avenger. From there, he does some saving, even falls in love with a woman who's blind, and through later sequels, they were eventually going to have twins. As craziness craziness and weirdness. And they even live in the junkyard surrounded by garbage. Crazy stuff. This movie does not follow that storyline and origin. So to put it into like comic book terms, the original 1984 movie was Earth 616, and this new film is the Ultimate Universe. We're not following Melvin the janitor. We instead are following Winston the janitor, who is not necessarily a dorky teenager, but a single stepfather. He's looking after his stepson Wade after his mother has passed away, and he's doing everything he can to pay the bills, get by, and raise the kid as his own. And I am obviously perfectly fine with them taking liberties with the origin story. I'd love to meet the guy who is pissed about the Toxic Avenger origin change up. Like, if you saw them Superman fans with the Kryptonian origin change, can't imagine some guy, not my Toxic Avenger, Melvin all the way. Who's this Winston fella? But I thought the changes actually worked really well in the movie, and Peter Dinklage actually plays the role so sympathetically. He still is kind of a loser in this universe. He gets pushed around, is not very tough, is doing his best to be a role model for this stepson, but it's not working. And I even really also enjoyed seeing Jacob Tremblay now. Like, I just saw that kid all the time in different movies, and now he's getting older. It felt a little odd to see him not be 10 years old all the time. I'm like, what? Children grow up? What? And that's really the thing this Toxic Avenger movie has way over those older films, because I'm not even going to sugarcoat it. This is the best Toxic Avenger movie, but when I say that, I think I am also trying to say this is the most tolerable Toxic Avenger movie to newcomers. The star power is really helping. I mean, you don't just have Peter Dinklage nailing it. Although he's not under a lot of the makeup whenever he finally becomes a Toxic Avenger. It's instead actress Luisa Guerrero who does all the physical work, and Peter Dinklage does a voiceover, which, let me tell you right there, voiceover in this movie also miles better than the voiceover in the original. Even as a kid, I was like, why does the voice not match this guy? Kevin Bacon is one of the main villains. Always a treat to see him. You also have Elijah Wood as, I would think, a version of the Penguin. He looks like someone who's just trying to play Oswald Cobblepot in Batman movie. And it's really these celebrities that are doing the best with what they are given. Because even with me calling this the best Toxic Avenger movie, there were parts of me that were slightly disappointed with what was given. Like, okay, I knew what I was going in for, and I already knew it probably wasn't going to be considered a good movie, but I was hoping to be really entertained. And I'll tell you what, they try. I feel like because my theater was empty, it took away from kind of like that theater reaction. I was like one of like 5 other people in the room. And although there's plenty of jokes and humor going on, not a lot of it was landing. There was a couple of jokes that did get me going, but the film actually wasn't as entertaining as I was hoping for. I'm actually kind of surprised some studios saw this and just thought, oh, we can't release this. This is too raunchy. This is too crazy. When for Troma standards, I'd say this is kind of tame. Yes, there's like 1 or 2 kind of crazy sequences. I will just put this photo up, blurring a certain piece. But even like the gore and bloodshed going on in this film is mainly CGI. And to me, just CGI gore and blood doesn't do anything for me. There was actually something I really admired back in the day with the old Toxic Avenger movies, using mainly prosthetics. And there is actually some cool prosthetic work in here. I don't want to take away from that. Like on the Toxic Avenger himself, there's some pulsating stuff on his head, on his chest. There's this little weird bird that shows up that's like a little animatronic. I think is kind of cool. But man, for a lot of like the gore and bloodshed, it was just a CGI effect. And I was like, oh, okay, that kind of sucks. I wish also the story was just a little bit more focused and not all over the place. I was totally open to the idea of changing up the main origin, the main story, the main idea of who the Toxic Avenger is, this dork who's then gifted the powers. And I don't know if it's weird to say, I like the idea of going with a little person for the Toxic Avenger. I feel like it does add something new to the character, but the story just was not reeling me in. If anything, it felt very forced. Like there is some stuff in there that's still relevant to this day. Like the Kevin Bacon and his company are all part of like this insurance, health, Medicare thing. Like maybe that was the reason the movie was on the shelf for a while, given, you know, how Peter Dinklage's character is kind of going after the CEO of a health insurance and with modern news. In fact, there was even a scene involving a burger joint where a bunch of criminals went crazy because the company decided to change his logo. Like, oh my, That literally was just the news this past week. The Cracker Barrel peeps were going crazy, and there's actually a sequence with that in here. And I guess that was also some of the thing I wanted a little bit more of, this Tromaville. It's got a rebranded name since this is a different universe. And hey, you want the multiverse explained in Tromaville, let James Gunn do it for you.
As you can plainly see, for every dimension there exists a diametric opposite of that dimension.
I'm never getting invited to another DC event again. I'm just saying that right now. Good thing my reputation is squeaky clean. Dora the Explorer is a lot like McDonald's and porn. I can explain, but in this version, it's called Stromaville, just st.roma, so Stromaville, and there is kind of a charm to that universe. It's almost like this really filthy, nastier, uglier Gotham, where there are people who like dress up all weird or stuck in time. It's kind of an interesting area, and I felt like they didn't get to really play around too much. I think a lot of that was because of the budget. But again, that's not to say I hated the movie. I actually enjoyed it for what it was, and it was kind of reminiscing of a time or a style of filmmaking that just isn't really here anymore or doesn't really get that much attention. I will say by the end of the movie, there was a part of me kind of smiling because they had gotten me to care about the Toxic Avenger character through Peter Dinklage. There's kind of like this sad factor attached to him because of obviously what happens to him, and it's the closest emotional thing that you'll get throughout the course of the movie. So with that said, this is a tough sell. I'm mainly only talking to people interested or original fans of the Toxic Avenger. Like, yeah, you're gonna get a kick out of it, and it'll be a nice thing to like reminisce back on. This is not going to make a bunch of new fans. This is not going to get you to want to go back. And like I said, I don't even recommend you go back to the old Toxic Avenger movies. Watch a clip or two if you want on YouTube and then decide for yourself. But as an homage to once was and a style of filmmaking that has kind of just gone away now, it was all right. So when it comes to the Toxic Avenger, I'm going to give action 3 stars. I feel like it was actually kind of light on the action. There are some sequences, and I think there's actually a lot of terrible editing throughout this movie, but maybe those were purposeful choices to go back to that very independent, low-budget vibe. But maybe that's just me trying to be in defense of the movie. Comedy in the film, I'm going to give it 2.5 stars. Like, there were some funny moments, and I feel like maybe I would find a lot of the moments in this film a lot funnier if I had a crowd that was roaring with me on a lot of these scenes, but most of the humor was mostly small chuckles, and it's nowhere near the offensive, raunchy humor that Troma is usually known for. It feels like they played it safe for what audiences are today. Drama in the film, I'm gonna give it 2.5 stars. I feel like they had something with the stepfather angle, motivation to go after this healthcare company, but then when it came to like tying that in to becoming a hero in the Toxic Avenger, a lot of that stuff felt very forced in the movie. Suspense in the film, I'm gonna give it 2 stars. This isn't really the kind of movie that has you on the edge of your seat, although there are a couple of sequences where I was like, oh, I thought that character was done for. And horror in the movie, I'll give 1.5 stars to. Like I said, there's blood and guts, but it's nothing like even all that ultra violent, especially with like Cineverse, the studio that picked this movie up for distribution. They're known for the Terrifier films, and maybe they've just set the bar way too high for what a violent, grotesque movie is, but that's what Troma was. It's a very violent, grotesque, and this feels a little tame for Troma. When it comes to the 3 C's, I'll be honest with you, I have no idea who is best recommended to out of the 3 C's for the Toxic Avenger, because casual viewers are gonna be the ones walking out because they are maybe not familiar with the Troma style and what makes these kind of movies appealing to some, while cinephiles as well. I mean, they're cult films for a reason. They only have like a niche group of people that kind of twistedly enjoy this style. If anything, I guess I'm gonna have to go with critics because they are seeming to be the ones most kind to the film, mainly for what it represents and paying homage to the longest running independent film studios. So there's like a respect involved with this, but that respect from a critic standpoint isn't going to translate well for all the others. So when it comes to the Toxic Avenger, although I highly want to recommend you like go out and support this in theaters just because it was so close to being a movie that was just not even shown in theaters, was going to be shelved away and disappearing. Plus, part of their marketing campaign, they even gave away $5 million to unpaid medical bills for people who needed it. And I'm like, that's just such a good deed. But if I'm being honest about how I felt about the movie, enjoyed it, I think it is a film you could wait to watch and enjoy on streaming or rent at home.
That'll do, Donkey. That'll do.
Again, not a film I disliked. I actually had an enjoyment and there was a fun reminiscing of it. I was just hoping for more of that entertainment value. I felt like there was a bit of a lull in the story. But for me to even say that for a modern day Toxic Avenger movie like that, that's a win. And like I said, this is the best that they have made with this franchise. Let me know your guys' thoughts with the Toxic Avenger, what you enjoyed, what you didn't enjoy. Do you think we'd somehow ever get another one? I don't know, man. Anything, everything, be sure and like, subscribe, follow me on Twitter at 3C Films or on TikTok at 3C Films. But as always, I'm Chris. Take care.